With the likes of Tundra Tactical memeing on the concept, yet there being new offerings prominently displayed at SHOT Show 2024, yeah, goes to show how far I am behind on my production schedule. But we need to ask the question, will wheel and lever guns see you through the apocalypse? Let's get after it. I'm James Merritt, emergency manager and career soldier, and this is Readiness Nation. Now, this is the type of video I was planning on putting on the spin-off channel Readiness Nation GQC, where we discuss science and technology as it pertains to emergency management, survivalism, self-defense, and military operations. But as it turns out, building your first channel is hard enough that I need to focus on this one first. But the plan is still to spin off the other two channels eventually. In the meantime, though, everything will be on the main channel. So with that said, on to today's controversy, which is all about whether or not the modernized versions of the venerated guns of the Old West will effectively see you through a collapse event, or is it all just LARPing nonsense? Those in the pro camp point out these weapons work on simple, low-tech, sturdy mechanisms, while the con camp points out low ammo capacity, longer reload times, and shorter maximum effective ranges. I gotta say, at surface glance, it looks like the cons have it. But do they really? To analyze this in proper context and to find if and where revolvers and lever-action rifles might have some utility, we need to review the phases of the Individual Readiness Framework, which is the framework that I developed from 5,000 to 6,000 pages of DoD and DHS doctrine and is the basis of my perspective for all of these videos. Phase 0 is what you're in right now. It's the pre-incident preparatory phase. Phase 1 is about getting from wherever you are when the incident begins back to your primary location, i.e. your house. Phase 2 is defending in place at your primary location, either until the incident is resolved or you're forced to make movement to your secondary location. Phase 3 is about making movement from your primary to secondary location, and on foot if need be. Phase 4 is defending in place at your secondary location until the emergency resolves, or as the government studies suggest, 90% of the population of this and every other developed country dies off in the first year after a full collapse event. I explain this in full detail in my video How the World Actually Ends. And finally, Phase 5 is conducting subsistence agricultural operations and agroeconomic development to rebuild civilization. Now, throughout phases 0 through 4, you're definitely going to want to be using modern weapons and equipment. And for any fighting you might have to do in phases 2 through 4, you're going to want to be using as close to military-grade weapons and equipment as you can get your hands on. But it's in phase 5 where you need to start looking at low-tech ways of doing everything. And that's where revolvers and lever-action rifles may really shine. If you missed my first video where I properly introduce myself, amongst other things, I'm a civil affairs officer. And one of our main areas of work is stability operations and nation building. And in addition to my 3 degrees in technology, I also did doctoral level cross-training in social policy and macro-developmental economics. When added to my education and training in emergency management, what it all adds up to is that I specialize in the rise and fall of civilization. And it's that specialization that's integral to this conversation. You see, unlike in your favorite post-apocalyptic video games, where as the game goes on, you get access to better and better loot, in a real collapse event, things are going to get worse and worse for a long time before they get any better. What you need to understand is that even if you stockpile goods to keep various machines and major appliances running after a collapse event, is that those machines and major appliances have a service life that will eventually run out. And to make new ones, you need a literal army of engineers, technologists, and skilled machinists and craftsmen. With 90% of the population expected to die off after a collapse event, there won't be anywhere near enough skilled labor to rebuild anything anytime soon. So the institutions and infrastructure to train new skilled labor will have to be rebuilt before industry can be rebuilt. And before any of that can be done, enough agricultural surplus needs to be generated consistently such that local economies can support specialized labor again. So rebuilding anything remotely resembling what we would consider civilization is a several-decade-long endeavor at a minimum. So you aren't going to have access to anything new that you or one of your neighbors can't build yourselves with the tools you have in your garage. And that goes for weapons and ammunition as well. Once the supply of factory ammunition is gone, it's gone. So we have to talk about reloading, and this is where those wheel and lever guns will really start to shine. The first thing we need to talk about are the casings themselves. With some rare exceptions, revolvers and lever-action rifles are generally chambered for cartridges with straight walls, meaning that the internal diameter of the casing and the diameter of the bullet are the same. When firing a straight-walled cartridge, all of the pressure is released through an aperture equal in diameter to the vessel containing the burning gunpowder, and thus there's equal pressure applied to the walls of the casing. With a necked-down cartridge, the pressure is canalized down to exit through an aperture significantly more narrow than the diameter of the vessel containing the burning gunpowder. This is great for bullet velocity, but it's terrible for the structural integrity of the casing around its neck and shoulder. This additional wear and tear means that necked-down casings can be reloaded fewer times than straight-walled casings before they become too worn or damaged to be reloaded again. Accounts of how many times you can reload casings vary widely, but the general consensus is you can reload straight-walled casings about twice as many times as you can necked-down casings. So if you aren't going to see new brass anytime soon, you're better off to be working with straight-walled brass instead of necked brass. And when you're thinking about reloading in post-apocalyptia, if you're planning on hoarding all the factory components to reload with, you're doing it wrong. If you're hoarding factory bullets, gunpowder, and primers to reload the casings of the factory ammo you're hoarding, you're not actually saving any money when you factor in the cost of investing in all the reloading tools, versus not buying the tools and components and just hoarding more factory ammo on the front end. You also have to think about the time you'll have to invest in actually reloading these rounds, in a time and a place where your ability to eat will be predicated on you spending most of your time doing agricultural chores. So unless you're going to make most of the components yourself, you're better off just hoarding more factory ammo. My back-of-the-envelope math on the subject suggests that if you were reloading with all factory components, you'd only be saving about $70 per 500 rounds of 5.56. Additionally, to get a full set of all new reloading tools, it would run you about $700. As such, your break-even point is reloading 5,000 rounds of 5.56. Or another way to think about that is that for the price of 1,000 rounds of 5.56 and all of the tools and factory supplies to reload those casings 5 times, you could just stockpile 6,000 rounds of factory 5.56 and not have to spend all that time reloading. Now you could of course find things on sale or find the reloading tools used, which would change this math a little bit. But generally this is what you're looking at. And that math doesn't look good for reloading with factory components versus just stockpiling more factory ammo. So if you're making components yourself, we need to talk about the pros and the cons of what you can actually produce yourself. First up is the gunpowder. Basic black powder has been made for centuries, so with a few basic chemistry tools and a little bit of know-how, you'll be able to make it too. However, this will be basic, old-timey black powder, which burns slower and dirtier than the smokeless powder found in modern ammunition. This means 2 things for your reloaded cartridges. First, they'll have a lower bullet velocity than modern factory loads, and second, there'll be more fouling of your firearm. Black powder burning slower than smokeless powder also means that there's lower chamber pressures. So if you try to fire these rounds from semi-automatic weapons, it will most likely lead to a short stroking of the action, and a failure to extract, or a failure to feed. Black powder burning dirtier means more cleaning and maintenance for any weapon. But this is particularly a problem for any weapon that uses a direct impingement gas operating system, because all the extra fouling could easily obstruct the gas tube and prevent the weapon from cycling. Black powder is also corrosive, meaning that when burned it leaves a chemical residue that's damaging to metal. So firing your black powder reloaded cartridges from a direct impingement or gas piston operated weapon means this corrosive residue will start to damage the delicate parts of the weapon's gas operating system, ultimately destroying the weapon over time. Revolvers and lever-action rifles, however, will not suffer any of these problems, because they were originally designed to operate with cartridges using black powder. So whereas there will be some loss of performance compared to modern factory ammunition, your post-apocalyptic wheel or lever gun will be able to perform just as well as its ancestors did. Next, we need to discuss the bullets. It's very easy to cast your own jacketless lead bullets with just a few simple tools. However, making jacketed bullets or swaged solid copper bullets is more complex and involves far more costly tools. This ends up being a limiting factor for your post-apocalyptic weapon selection if you plan on reloading, because even attempting to reach the kind of chamber pressures commonly generated by necked cartridges will shred jacketless bullets. So if you want to run any type of more modern rifle, you'll have to make swaged copper bullets. Not only does this require investing in a hydraulic press, but copper is about 21% less dense than lead, meaning there's less mass to your bullets and thus yield less kinetic energy on target. So what you actually get when trying to manufacture your own, let's say 5.56 rounds in post-apocalyptia, is a significantly slower, lighter bullet that causes significantly more fouling and corrosion to your gas operating system. In short, this is a terrible course of action. Conversely, lever-action rifles and revolvers will suffer none of these problems. because they were originally designed to operate with jacketless lead bullets. Yes, again, there will be a loss of performance compared to modern jacketed factory loads, but again, your wheel and lever guns will perform as well as their ancestors. Finally, you could make your own primer caps, but due to the complexity of manufacturing them versus the cost of stockpiling them, you're probably best served in all cases to just stockpile the modern factory primers. Primer caps of any size generally run you less than $100 per thousand. So this consideration is a wash. So, will wheel and lever guns see you through the apocalypse? In light of the aforementioned analysis, I would say that once all of the pre-collapse factory loads are burnt up, and before the reemergence of industrial capabilities, it is very likely that cowboy guns will once again be king. But do you need to include revolvers and lever-action rifles in your stockpile? I wouldn't say that. The 6,000 rounds of 5.56 I mentioned in the cost-benefit analysis is definitely enough to last you a lifetime if your secondary location is appropriately placed and you don't go looking for trouble. But the post-apocalyptic cowboy is definitely a viable course of action about 10 years into a full collapse event. What do you guys think? Are you going to add cowboy guns to your plan? Have you already added them? Do you still think it's a meme? Are there any considerations that I missed? Sound off in the comments. And that's going to be it for me. So if you found this information useful, give me the old controlled pair on the like and subscribe buttons. And if you found this information useful enough that you want to buy me a beer about it, there's a link to my Patreon in the description. So until next time, this is James Merritt for Readiness Nation, reminding you to always be the master of your fate and the captain of your soul.